We spend a lot of money on food on a daily basis, and there's really no getting around it. Just like putting gas in your car, we need this food to survive. So it only makes sense to have a little bit extra on hand. From a preparedness perspective, you're going to spend quite a bit of your prepping budget on food storage, but that doesn't mean that it's going to cost you more. You're just making that investment up front rather than extending it out over the course of months or years. Having some food stored away, even if it's just a week, is really important because it's just a nice feeling knowing that even if something small happens, like you run out of money before payday or there are shortages at the grocery store, you won't miss a beat. It was pretty entertaining watching the great toilet paper shortage of 2020 unfold as I stayed at home carefree. While that situation wasn't dangerous or life-threatening, it did show how quickly things can spin out of control. Now imagine it wasn't just toilet paper. Imagine the grocery store shelves are empty other than maybe a few cans of asparagus or some rotting fruit and vegetables. Would you want to be there in a situation like this, fighting over the last can of asparagus? I wouldn't. While there are a lot of scenarios that don't involve the grocery stores being empty, the shelves being empty, this is something that we need to consider. The longer something goes on, the more empty these stores are going to be and the more valuable our food storage is going to be. So in this video, I want to break down the best foods that you can store for emergencies, disasters, and even extended SHTF type situations. Now, instead of going through a bunch of different foods that you can buy, I want to break this down into categories. I'm going to go over the types of food that you should include in your food storage, not necessarily a list of products, although I will mention a few. While there's a lot of similarities in the average diet, what my family eats and what your family eats could be completely different. And towards the end of this video, I'm also going to go over some of the best practices that'll help you save time and money and build your food storage the right way. Building your food storage so you're not throwing away a bunch of expired food or buying a bunch of food that your family isn't going to eat. This might be the most important part of this video. Okay, so let's jump into the different types of food storage that you should have, whether you are preparing for a couple weeks or a couple of years. And the first one I have, and this is one, especially if you're just starting out, this is the starting point, and that is pantry foods. These foods are great because they have, at the minimum, a 6-month shelf life all the way up to a couple of years. They don't require refrigeration. You just put them in the cupboard, and they're foods that your family eats on a regular basis. Some of these pantry foods include canned goods. I've done a video on the best types of canned food that you can buy. I'll leave that link in the description below. You've got boxed meals, you've got spaghetti and noodles, cereals, potato flakes, powdered milk. I mean, the list just goes on and on when it comes to different things that you can store in your pantry, and they will last for months and even years. And another good thing about these pantry foods is most of them don't require much cooking, especially the canned foods where you can basically pop some of those open and then just eat them directly out of the can. Some of them will require a little bit of water, which means a couple of things. You're going to need a way to heat those up, and also consider water when you are thinking about your food storage, how much you are going to use for that. I will go into a little bit more detail about that later on. One more thing when it comes to pantry foods is don't forget the pets. Whether you are talking about dry food, wet food, or even dog treats, cat treats, whatever your pet is, make sure you're thinking about them as well. You can buy a month or two or even 3 or 4 enough food in advance for your pets, and you're not going to have to worry about them, or you're not going to have to share your meal with them just to keep them fed. Like I said, pantry foods are the starting point, and they also make up a bulk of your food storage. This is what you're going to eat in 80% of the disaster or emergency scenarios we can think of. And also, don't forget the manual appliances, the can openers. It's great to have all these canned foods, but if you can't open them, that is going to be a challenging situation. Also, a lot of us like coffee, so make sure you have that percolator or the French press like we have, which all that takes is the ability to heat up some water and then you have coffee. So think about those manual appliances and all the things that you'll need to make sure you can cook and prepare a meal in an emergency or a disaster situation. All right, so the next type of food that I think people should have in their long-term food storage is the prepackaged long-term food. Now, this isn't an absolute must, and it is fairly expensive and not that healthy for you, but I think it's a great way to increase your food storage really easily. So if you have 3 weeks to a month of pantry food stored, you can buy some of this long-term food storage later on and take that month and turn it into 3 months, 4 months, whatever you decide to do. The long-term food storage is great because it's really convenient. You can store it away fairly easily. It comes in buckets, and it's really a set it and forget it type item. It lasts for 25 years, so it's going to be there if a disaster scenario happens and it's larger than you expected, you have that backup food source. Now, these long-term food storage packs might not be what you're going to go to first, which is why it's great that they last so long. Your pantry is what you'll be going for first, but this is that extra insurance policy to build up your long-term food storage. Now, when it comes to the prepackaged long-term food, you've got a few different options. Over at the SHTF shop, I sell Legacy Foods, which is basically meals that come in bags. So you can feed a 72-hour kit, cost around $100, and you can feed a family of 4 for a couple of days. And the great thing about these meals is all you need is a little bit of water, a way to heat that water, and you are good to go. I also recommend having some meat, whether that is canned meat or the freeze-dried meat that Legacy Foods sells, just to add a little bit extra to that meal because they can be pretty boring. And along the same lines, make sure in your pantry you have a bunch of different spices. That way you can sort of doctor these things up and make them taste a little better, because while they are lightweight and you can get good calories from them, they don't taste the greatest as far as when you're thinking about pantry foods and the foods you eat on a regular basis, but they're not horrible. Most of these are also pretty high in sodium, so you need to take that into account as well. Just because they are long-term food storage and store for 25 years doesn't necessarily mean you want to be eating them long-term. If you were eating nothing other than these prepackaged long-term foods for a year or so, that might have some health implications down the line. Also, you have the prepackaged ingredients. We store quite a bit from August Farms, and there are just really no end to the different things that you can get stored in number 10 cans, from biscuits to powdered milk to different ingredients, dried eggs, even flour. So there are a lot of different options, not just the meals, when it comes to these long-term food storage products. After you get your pantry foods taken care of and you've stocked that up as much as you feel is necessary, then I think it's probably a good idea to consider these prepackaged long-term food storage foods and bulk up your food storage in a way that you don't have to really pay attention to it. You get a couple buckets, you throw it in your closet or in your basement, and you are good to go in an emergency. So I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but as you build up your food storage and as you progress along in preparedness, I think it's really important to think about other DIY food storage methods. Things that you're going to do that take a little bit more skill and knowledge than the Pantry Foods would, that just going shopping or buying some of these long-term food storage products. We need to start thinking about how we can do some of these and save a little bit of money while we're doing it. A few of these methods include the 5-gallon food storage buckets, which is pretty popular in preparedness circles. You can store quite a few different things, whether you're talking about flour, grains, rice, beans, a lot of different things that you can store, and you can do it for about half the cost of these long-term food storage companies. And all you need with this is the food, whether it's flour, rice, beans, the 5-gallon bucket, and a Mylar bag and some oxygen absorbers. And like I said, this is about 50% cheaper than what you would pay to one of these long-term food storage companies. Now, this is one of those situations where what do you have more of, time or money? If you don't want to go through the hassle of putting together these 5-gallon buckets, maybe you do go with the long-term food storage companies. If you are more concerned about the sodium and all of the different things they put in these foods, maybe you want to do it yourself and just take one day a month and build up your food storage with these 5-gallon buckets. Another great option is freeze drying, and I recently bought a Harvest Right freeze dryer, and this can save you quite a bit of money as well. Although I will say the initial upfront cost of buying a Harvest Right, you're looking at $3,000 or $4,000. So if you're not really serious about building up your long-term food storage, this might not be the best option. But if you are building up your food storage and trying to get to 6 months or even longer, somewhere in that time frame, a Harvest Right will absolutely pay for itself in the long run. You can do just about anything in a Harvest Right that these long-term food storage companies can. We use it quite a bit for chicken and beef, the meat for different meals. You can freeze dry vegetables. You can freeze dry, candy. You can freeze dry ice cream. There are just so many different things you can do. And as long as you store that properly, it's going to last you 10, 20, and even up to 25 years. So freeze drying, if that is in the budget and you will use it enough, it will eventually pay for itself. There's also the old school methods like smoking and salting meats, preserving foods the old school way. And then you've got, growing the animals yourself. We've got a bunch of chickens here, which are great for eggs. And in an emergency situation, although they're not roosters, they're egg-laying hens, they could become a meal in an emergency. You've also got a few other different small game animals, rabbits and things like that. So you don't necessarily need to have a couple cows and 10 acres of property. You can have these different food sources on even just a small piece of land. And a couple other options are like vacuum sealing foods, although some of these might require refrigeration, and even home canning, which is a fantastic way to build up your food storage. It does take a little bit of education and understand how to do it correctly and follow the best practices and avoid things like botulism and spoilage. But canning your own food can be a great way and a fun way to build up your food storage. And again, just like the Pantry Foods, it's foods your family eats on a regular basis. So you're not going to have to worry much about those spoiling. A lot of these home canned foods can last for, 3 to 5 years, somewhere in that range. But again, it's food your family eats, so it's not a big concern. You can make different soups and all sorts of different things that you can do with home canning. And the one most important DIY food storage option, I think, is growing your own. So learn how to garden. And just like the animal husbandry, gardening doesn't require 10 acres of land like you see in the old movies. There are a lot of different options like container gardening, backyard gardening, raised bed gardening, a lot of these different things that will help you supplement your long-term food storage and also get the nutrition that you need. So gardening is one of those, when you first start out, maybe you're not growing enough to sustain yourself for long periods of time, but it is that learning process. That way you understand how everything works. If and when something happens where the grocery store shelves are empty for 6-8 months and you need to be able to grow your own. Having seeds and things like that is great, but if you don't know how to actually grow those, then it's basically a crapshoot and you're crossing your fingers. Now, this is just a few of the DIY methods. I know there are quite a few more. If you guys have anything you want to put in the comments below, let me and everyone else know what you think. There are a lot of different options when it comes to DIY food storage. But again, I would take care of your pantry first, build up your food storage to the point where you feel comfortable, and then start researching some of these different methods and figure out what might work best for you and work on those. So now I want to talk a little bit about figuring out your game plan, doing a personal assessment, and figuring out how you're going to go about this. Because the more you plan in advance, the more time and money you are going to save doing this. And this is sort of like going to the grocery store with a shopping list. If you go without a shopping list, you're going to end up with a lot of things that you may not need, and you're going to forget a few things that you absolutely do need. So if you go into this with a game plan beforehand, you're going to be able to put a food storage plan together relatively quickly, and you're going to save quite a bit of money. So the first thing I would look at is your budget. A lot of people feel like right off the bat, they need to max out the credit cards. And that is not the case. That is actually the opposite of preparedness. So figure out how much extra you're able to spend on a monthly basis and start building up your food storage that way. It doesn't have to be done all at once. Over the course of a few months or a year, you'll look back and you'll see that you're more prepared than you ever thought you were going to be. So make sure you pay attention to your budget and don't overdo things. Another thing you need to consider is the space you have. Where are you going to put all of this food? And there are a lot of different options, not just the kitchen pantry. You've got, if you have space under your bed where you could put some canned foods, the bottom of closets, there's a lot of different places around the home that we can sort of figure this out and add to our food storage. Here at my house, we have my basement that I have a couple of shelves, and I treat this sort of like a restaurant or a grocery store would, with the first in, first out method. So the foods that I buy at the store will start out, they will come down in the basement. And then as the pantry empties, I will bring them up to the kitchen pantry. And then the circle continues. I'll go back to the grocery store and that food goes to the basement. Then it goes up to the kitchen. That way, everything gets rotated properly and I know exactly what I have. And also think about the length of time that you want to prepare for. And this is different for everybody. And this could also change depending on the circumstances, the things going on around the world, and your view on what you feel you need. So think about the time frame that you want to prepare for. If it's a month, think about the items you need for that. If it's longer than that, that's where some of the things I talked about earlier come into. But do what you feel is comfortable. Don't worry about what other people say online, how much you need to have. Do what you feel is comfortable and what you feel is necessary. And sort of along the same lines as that is think about the different disasters or emergencies that you are preparing for. If it's not an EMP or a Mad Max type situation, then maybe you don't feel like you need that 2 years worth of food storage. But if it is natural disasters, if you live somewhere down in Florida with the hurricanes or California with the earthquakes, that might be more important to you. So keep those in mind as you're building up your food storage as well. Think about that. What are you going to buy first? How much of that are you going to buy? How does that fit into your budget and the space you have? And with this game plan in mind, you're going to save quite a bit of time and you're not going to waste as much money filling up your trunk with a bunch of canned foods and some bags of flour. So I think it's really important to have a game plan in mind and make sure you write that game plan down and go into this knowing exactly what you want and need. And with these best practices, this is why I think canned food should make up a big part of your pantry food storage. These are foods that your family is going to eat. These are foods that are going to help you get the calories you need, maintain your nutritional needs, and foods that will be really easy to store, eat, and prepare in a disaster or emergency situation. Like I said earlier, I did a video on the best canned foods to store, but I also did a video. I had some canned food that was 8 to 10 years old that was tucked back in a closet and forgotten about. And I decided to open those up and see which of those still tasted good and which ones didn't. If that's something you're interested in, make sure and check out this video where I opened up a bunch of these really expired foods. But that's it for today, everyone. Take care and prepare. We will talk to you all later.